All right, we're going to talk about DNA Painter, a chromosome browser, and more. And we're going to talk a lot about the and more because there is some great information on that site, and quite a bit of it is on the free side. And we're going to talk about the free versus pay and all of that today. So first, let's talk about what's a chromosome browser. So what does it mean to map chromosomes? It's a technique of assigning shared DNA segments to a particular ancestor or set of ancestors. It depends on your preference, whether you assign DNA to a certain person or you assign it to a set of ancestors. And most of the time for what I'm doing, I'm assigning it to a set of ancestors because I don't necessarily know until I go one more generation back whether it's the male or female there. So I'm generally assigning things to a pair until I can sort that. If you have a second cousin match where you share a set of great-grandparents, you can hypothesize that you match each other on segments that come from one ancestor or the couple. If you're one more generation back, you might be able to get to the individual. And you might need to change your hypothesis. So just like anything else we talk about with DNA, you're constantly reevaluating what you think you know. And if you're not willing to do that, this probably is not the tool for you, because you will find out in short order if you have some errors in your tree or some mistakes in your logic. So I'm going to show you what a couple of different chromosome browsers look like. This is FTDNA. I tried to make the contrast a little bit better because on their site it's really pale, like white on white. It's really hard to read. But this is what a typical chromosome browser looks like, and it starts with chromosome number 1, works its way down to either the X or it'll say 23. Remember, Y DNA isn't included here. Mitochondrial DNA is not included here, but the 22 autosomes and the X are included. So if you look at this, the dark shaded parts are parts that I share with a particular cousin. And I know who that cousin is. I know what pair of ancestors we tie back to. And you might say, well, how do I know that? Well, I know that through a long line of research on that family. Now, that doesn't mean that I couldn't have made a mistake in my tree, because that happens. This is what 23andMe's chromosome browser looks like. And this is my match with a girl called Jaylyn. And Jaylyn solved an adoption mystery that was in my family. And she's my mom's sister's granddaughter from a son given up for adoption. So that's the words for the diagram that's on the right. So my grandparents had my mom and had another girl, my mom's sister. My mom's sister gave up several children for adoption. And then that son who was given up for adoption had a daughter, and she is a DNA match for me. So I've been looking for some of these children given up for adoption. And so all of a sudden, Jaylyn came up as a match to me. So this is what the chromosome browser looks like of all the DNA that Jaylyn and I share. And she is my first cousin once removed, so that would be my first cousin's child. That's the predicted relationship, and that actually is the actual one. And we share about 7.3% of DNA, so a pretty good amount of DNA. And look at that X. Not surprised, are we, that we share almost all of the X as well. So sometimes a chromosome browser can solve a DNA mystery for you. This is what DNA Painter's chromosome browser looks like. And I've redacted some names here because this is just an image that I pulled off of the internet. And you can see it starts with chromosome number 1 and works its way down. I didn't even put in chromosomes 22 and 23 down there because I wanted you to be able to see it. But if you look at chromosome number 1, can you see that there are 2 lines with chromosome number 1 that have pieces colored in? And there are 2 lines, horizontal lines, going across for chromosome 2 and so on. Those are maternal and paternal. And until you know which is which in your matches, you won't have them separated. But once you've determined, like in the case of Jaylyn, if I painted Jaylyn to my chromosome browser in DNA Painter, I would attach her to my mom's side, my maternal chromosome, because she's related to me through my mom. So part of DNA Painter is mapping people to your DNA, your chromosomes that are listed. But the other part of it is figuring out mom's side versus dad's side. And then the other part of that is finding other matches that tie you back to the same set of ancestors. So let's talk about singular or small group mapping, because there are 2 different kinds of mapping that you can do in DNA Painter. And singular and small group mapping is what I see the most of when I watch webinars and I learn about how do I use the tool. But there is another kind of mapping that I want to show you as well. So we'll start with singular or small group mapping. So we're going to start with one of my family groups, just so that we're going to follow this all through the presentation. And I realize that you don't necessarily have these names committed to memory or know who any of these folks are. And it's a little strange, you know, when you're talking about someone else's tree. But William and Emma are my great grandparents on my mother's side. They're my grandfather's parents. So on the left side, you'll see Shields, that's my grandfather, my mother, April, and me. Next to Shields, you'll see his sister, Robbie. You'll see Murray and Melanie. And then next to Robbie, you'll see my grandfather's brother, Bill, daughter, Jane Ellen, and Rebecca. Now, we use family groups in genealogy for a lot of things. We use family groups to break through brick walls, to see who migrated with whom, to look at where did this family end up and how are they functioning together as a group? Do we see them all in a row house in Sydney, Ohio? You know, where is it that we find this family group? And this family started out in Tennessee and all migrated to the Urbana, Sydney, you know, Champaign, Shelby County area. I'm sorry, yes, Champaign, Shelby County, to work on the railroad. My great-grandfather William worked on the railroad. Now let's go one more generation back and let's look at William's parents, Samuel and Margaret. So Samuel and Margaret are my second great-grandparents, and 3 of their children are here. They had, I believe, 12 in all, but I've listed 3 of them here. William and Emma had multiple children, and I've starred all the people who have DNA tests. So you can see that my mom and I do, my mom's cousin Murray and his daughter do, and Jane's daughter Rebecca does as well. There's also other cousins along the way who have DNA tests. My great-grandfather's sister Nancy has a descendant, Francis, with a DNA test. And William's sister Julia has a descendant, Myrtle, with a DNA test. So if you can build the family trees and identify who are the people who have tests, this is going to help you to paint the chromosomes and then determine who is it that belongs to that family. I'm going to turn the video off here. There we go, because I don't want it to appear on screen. So we are assuming that a segment that's shared could lead you back to a couple. However, a segment shared could lead you back to more than one line of your family. So further information should always cause you to reevaluate your hypothesis. We don't know if there's pedigree collapse. We don't know if there's endogamy. We don't know if there's a situation that leads you to in two different directions. And I've talked about it before in some of my presentations that I have some relatives who are related on my mom's side and my dad's side to me, but my mom and dad aren't related to each other. So that happens as well. In DNA Painter, we're going to talk today about this wonderful tool that was created by Johnny Pearl. There's a Facebook page, DNA Painter User Group, I highly recommend. Johnny Pearl himself is in there all the time answering questions. There's some really great resources also at that site. There is YouTube video help and even DNA Central video help, although DNA Central has a fee associated. Lots of places where you can learn and watch videos and kind of do things side by side along with someone. So first, let's look at why. Why would you use a tool like this? Well, the goal is to map DNA segments from our matches to a particular set of ancestors, and then to use that map to place new matches. So as you compile all of these matches to your 23 chromosomes, then you can look at new matches and where you match those new folks and start to make assumptions about where they fit into your family tree. So you can sign up for an account. You can do free or pay. There's two ways to pay. You can do, oh, I should have said $30 for 6 months. Sorry, that's $30 for 6 months, not per month. And then $55 for a year. So you save a little bit by signing up for a year. On the free side, you can access all the tools, the Shared Centimorgan Project, the WATO tools, and things we're going to talk about today. You can have one chromosome map. There is no access to the bulk import, which is what I think is one of the powerful things about DNA Painter. But if you haven't used the free side yet, you probably don't need the bulk import yet. You can have one tree uploaded. And so again, that is a little bit limiting if you're working on multiple lines of your family, or maybe you have your spouse, or you and someone else in your family you're working on. And you can import up to the 4th great grandparents for GEDCOMs. Now that's usually sufficient to work on DNA, because once we get to like the 5th great grandparents, we have such a small amount of DNA we inherit from each one that it's difficult to pinpoint where that came from. The peril of small segments. For subscribers, you can have up to 50 profiles, which is pretty amazing. I'm not there yet. I think I have 3 right now, and most of them are demo. And you can have unlimited access to the bulk import, and that's pretty astounding. I love that tool. You can have up to 50 trees for those 50 profiles, and so on. So I really like the fact that that I have a lot more access on the pay side. But again, you have to look at your DNA dollars and figure out what's the best use for that. Secondly, why do I love DNA Painter? Well, you have to realize it's not for raw DNA, it's for segment matches. So it uses information from GEDMATCH or another site with segment information, so not Ancestry, but Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, MyHeritage. I love the fact that you can pull information from multiple sites into one tool. I think that's always helpful, particularly if you're trying to solve an unknown parent or grandparent case, an adoption case, foundling, or something like that. So that's another reason to really like this tool. Other than Ancestry, you can pull data in from multiple sources. Third, you're going to want to have a tree nearby. You're going to want to be able to look at your tree over and over and over. And so whether it's printed or whether it's online, or whether it's in like a tool like Family Tree Maker or Roots Magic, you're going to want to have your tree nearby so that you can connect the dots between people. So you can see here in my tree, you can see in the 3rd column, William Washington Todd, and his wife Emma, and then you can also see Samuel and Margaret, William's parents. So those are the pictures that I showed you earlier. So that's where we're going to do most of our demo today. That's probably the most prolific branch of my family. There are 10, 12 kids almost every generation. It's crazy how many kids they all had. But it makes for good presentation. All right, so let's talk about the chromosome browser for a little bit. So here's the example of what you start with. So you're going to find segment data either in GEDMATCH, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage. You're going to find that one-to-one correspondence between what you and your match share. This happens to be from GEDMATCH, this particular match. So after you paste this into DNA Painter, you can see the matches on chromosome number 9. It shows the start and end position. It shows you how long it is in centimorgans, about 44. And then you can see here chromosome number 9. And again, this is a small picture of the 22 pairs plus the X that you have. So it would show up with all of those other chromosomes too. But this little turquoise kind of piece is the piece that you share in common with someone else. And this has been attached to an ancestor, Joseph Seabright. Now this is from DNA Painter's website. There are lots of different demos there, step-by-step, great visuals there. So I just pulled some shots from theirs online so that you could see what it is that is involved in painting a segment. So what you're doing is you're copying and pasting from that table into their tool, and it maps it to the right chromosome. And then you attach it to an ancestor by giving it a color and or a name. And you may not have a name. You may know that 5 or 6 or 10 people are all related to the same person or couple, but you may not know their name yet, so they can still be unknown for a while. It can be the teal group that's, you know, unknown Smiths or unknown Reeds. So this is what the process is of chromosome mapping. You're taking data from a site that you already have access to, that you already have match lists with, and you're pasting it into Painter. So to get started with your first profile, you want to name it, and you should probably start with yourself. And the reason why I say that is because, first of all, if you're going to be on the free side and you only have one chromosome map, you're going to want to do your own first. Choose the gender. Remember, that's important because of the X chromosome, because men have 1 and women have 2. And then remember which cousins fill the gaps. So when you're talking about third cousins, those relate back to great-great-grandparents. So the more remote the cousin, the further back the connection. So to paint a match, here are some instructions. And of course, this is very well spelled out step by step from DNA Painter. But you want to click on Paint a Match and choose someone you know is related to you only through one parent. So you don't want to map your parents, because remember, you fully match your mom on one of every chromosome, and you fully match your dad on one of every chromosome. So you don't want to include your parents. You probably do not want to include your siblings, because they're huge matches between you and your siblings. So start with the next cousin group that you have, first cousins. Copy and paste the match, so that's autosomal and the X, and then label that with the common ancestral couple. Start with one that you know. If you have one in your list that you know, or you're pretty sure you know, realize you might have to go back and revisit that. And you can either click overlay or save. I usually do the save because you can undo it. So I usually don't do the preview and then the save. I just normally save it. So this is from GEDMATCH. Now I'm going to tell you that I don't currently endorse or recommend using GEDMATCH, but I do have a lot of legacy images and things, and some of you are still using GEDMATCH. Because of their recent security breaches, I'm not endorsing them right now, and I've removed all of my kits. So I've redacted the kit numbers, but I don't, only because I don't know if GEDMATCH is reusing the kit numbers. But this is a match that I have from that same set of ancestors, my great-grandparents William and Emma, and my great-great-grandparents Samuel and Margaret. This is the same family line. I have a cousin, Stacy, who's a match to me. And what I did in GEDMATCH was I looked up my cousin Stacy and I looked at the one-to-one. This is the autosomal compare one-to-one. And again, you have to do it for the X also. And this is the chart that GEDMATCH gave me. And this is what is copied and pasted into DNA Painter's tool. The nice thing about it is you can copy all of this and it takes out what it doesn't need. So you don't have to worry about getting the exact right things pasted in. But this is where my cousin Stacy and I both match in our DNA. I also have some family finder data that I've matched in, or I've mapped into DNA Painter. So this is what my match list looks like from Family Finder, from FTDNA. So these are a set of cousins, Nathan, Don, Stacy again, James, and Maurice, who all match back to that same couple, Samuel and Margaret. And so I can look at the information for these ancestors and I can get my match from each of those as well. So I can match myself to James, I can match myself to Stacy, or to Don, or to Nathan, and I can paste that into DNA Painter. So what I would do is I would say, let's try Don, let's see what my match looks like, and this is FTDNA. So this gives you a chart very similar to GEDMATCH with the chromosome number, start and stop locations of all the places that I matched Don, and that's what I copy and paste into Painter. Same thing is true of my heritage. I can review my DNA matches. This one happens to be Ron. So I can match with him and I can take those segments and I can paste into DNA Painter as well, because Ron and I share segments of DNA. And this is the Excel spreadsheet that comes with the match. And so I can copy and paste all this information into DNA Painter, and then it will paint Ron onto my 23 chromosomes, 23 pair. So the match in DNA Painter, I just wanted to notice, I want to see if you notice about Don and Ron. So this is Don's match on the left from FTDNA and Ron's match on the right from my heritage. And you might notice I matched both of them on chromosome 2, both of them on the same places on chromosome 10, and both of them in the exact same places on chromosome 15. That's because Don and Ron are twins. They are identical twins. And so regardless of which tool I'm in, I'm still matching them both. And I'm still able to paint them and they both show up overlaying each other. So from 23andMe, same thing, I can choose a match. So Rebecca B is also a match to me to that same ancestral couple. And so you can do DNA compare. And this is what 23andMe's chromosome browser looks like and the places there where I match Rebecca. And so I can find other matches that match Rebecca and me, and I can paint those into DNA Painter as well. So here's some matches that match both myself and Carol B. And there's a whole list of them here. And these are all known relatives that are from that same ancestral couple. I've investigated, I believe, all but one at this point. And if I hit compare, what I'll get is a chart for myself and Carol B. It'll give me something that I can copy and paste into the DNA Painter. So DNA Painter is looking for information about the name of the match, the chromosome number, the start and end, and in general, taking that information and mapping it to my 23 pairs of chromosomes. So once I go through and I've identified some of these, and we can look at this live after we do the recording, but this is my great-great-grandparents, Samuel, Todd, and Margaret Schaefer, and I've mapped 4 of my cousins to them. Do you see where Don and Ron are the same Don and Ron, Don and Ron. You can see them over and over, overlapping the identical twins. I've redacted some of the last names, but you can see my cousin Stacy shows up, looks like 5 times here. You can see where I have another cousin, Nathan, who shows up here a couple of times. So still in that same family group. So I recommend that when you're doing this and starting, you start with people you know so that you can get used to looking at all of their different names and how they're related to one another. So you can add information to your matches. There are lots of notes fields. You can add the names, their relationship, the kit numbers if you want to do that, the testing site. So if Ron or Don, one of them was in GEDMATCH, or I'm sorry, one of them was in Family Tree DNA and one of them was in 23andMe. You can add the testing site information. You can add the ancestral couple. You can really add notes to whatever you want and however you want to do that. And just remember, you might not recall why you mapped the person the way you did. That happens to me all the time. I'm working on a project, I get really excited about something, then I forget why I did what I did. So I'm constantly making notes just to kind of give myself that rabbit trail back. So make sure you're thinking about forward and backwards, because if we know the common ancestor or couple, we can map that match to our canvas. But we can also take the match and see where they fit on our map. So where is it that that person has DNA overlapping with people I've already identified as having Samuel and Margaret as ancestors? And again, this is still hypothesizing without further information. Like anything else with DNA analysis, you have to really be willing to go back, rethink, repostulate, rehypothesize, and not just be content that you've figured it out, because sometimes you will have information that conflicts with what you think is the answer. So what if you goof up? There's a couple ways you can fix it. You can edit a segment. You can edit or delete all the segments with a match so that you can reassign them. This happens to me a lot because I'll start out assigning someone and then I'll realize, oh, they're related to me through my mom and my dad's line, both. So I have to go back and revisit that. So a lot of times I do that group edit, or I delete all and I remap it once I have new information. So there really is a giant undo button for pretty much everything on DNA Painter. To look at the chromosomes, you can click on the chromosome to find out more about that chromosome. So who do you have mapped there? You can see all the segments. There's a lot of great information that comes up. And sometimes there's a shaded bar that shows you the common pileup areas. So make sure that you're careful in your assumption with the pileup regions. And if you aren't familiar with pileup regions, there are 2 different types of pileup regions. There are some that are unique to your small family, and then there are known regions for populations. And you can find out more on ISOG's wiki, and also there's some great information on segmentology.org. But your pileup regions that are known for populations are actually grayed out on DNA Painter so that you know you're kind of in an iffy area. So pileup region is when you have a number of people related because of, most of the time, biogeography. Most of the time you're related to them because you come from the same part of the world, not necessarily because you have a common ancestor with each of them. There are 3 sizes of pileups. We could talk probably for an hour about pileup regions, but there are small ones that are less than 5 centimorgans, and of course that's in the land of the small segments. We're probably not going to focus on that anyway. There are medium-sized pileups that could be pileup if the matches don't triangulate to each other. It could be that the pileup, it could be a pileup if the matches aren't mostly tied to mom or dad. So it doesn't pass phasing. And there are some pileups that are greater than 10 centimorgans. So it just depends. I've included a chart here of just one known PILEUP region, and there's a whole chart on ISOG's wiki, but chromosome number 6 has a PILEUP between 25 and 35 megabases, and it's a very common PILEUP region for Ashkenazi Jews, French Canadians, and more that are listed here. So the known PILEUP regions you might want to pay attention to, particularly if you have those ethnicities. This is from ISOG's wiki also, but more known PILEUP regions. You can Google search and find out which ethnic groups or which biogeographical regions are linked to these, but there are a lot of them. And then don't forget, you have your own individual PILEUP regions that may be just associated with your family. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about bulk matching, because I think this is the really cool part of chromosome painting. You can paint one person at a time to your profile, attach them to an ancestor or common ancestors, and you can do that one at a time. What you can also do is bulk matching, where you import lots of data from all your matches and within certain parameters we'll talk about, and then you can start identifying who's who from that. And so it's a different way to use the same tool. So let me show you that, and we'll also look at some samples. But in order to do bulk matching to DNA Painter, you have to download your match list and format it. Now, if you're not real great with spreadsheets, it's not too difficult to do, because I think there are only 4 columns. The name of your match, the start and end position, and the chromosome number. Oh, and the number of SNPs. So there are 5 columns. So you can take those columns from your downloads and paste them into their spreadsheet so that you can upload it. And what you'll get looks something like this. Now, again, I've redacted names, and when we go off, I'll show you, when we go off the recording, I'll show you what it looks like so you have a better idea. But this is just a snapshot of one of the chromosomes, and you can see where there's a lot of people. Look at the bottom here where a lot of people line up. So look at these first 3, they all stop or start at the same spot. They don't all stop at the same point, but they start at the same point. Here's another group I would investigate that all have the same approximate stop and end. I would investigate these 2, and then I would investigate that whole set. So the bulk matching allows you to look at larger groups of people rather than one at a time. So let's talk about some of the tools that are in DNA Painter, because even if you don't want to do the chromosome browser part, and you don't really want to do the mapping, there are a lot of great tools that are free there. And if you're not using the Shared Centimorgan Project there, you're really missing out. So in DNA Painter, under Tools, the Shared Centimorgan Project has been updated again. I believe it was in March. And March 2020. And what you can do here is you can input the total number of shared centimorgans for your match from any of the testing companies, and then it'll highlight for you what the relationship is. So if you put 658 centimorgans in there for your match, what highlights are the possible relationships for that match, given the data that's been collected. And now more than, I think it's 50,000 people have uploaded to the Shared Centimorgan Project. Also, tree completeness is something you can really focus and work on in DNA Painter. For tree completeness, if you've tried using through lines and you haven't been successful, if you struggle with the DNA tool that's 23andMe's family tree, if you have remote DNA cousins, you can't figure out who they are, how to place them, tree completeness might be something you want to look at. And the thing that I love about DNA Painter is you can upload your GEDCOM, and I believe on the free side that goes to the 4th great grandparents, but on the pay side, it goes through as many generations as you have in your tree. We know that not all of those are necessarily genealogically relevant to our genetic pursuit because they're very, very, very small, tiny segments. But we know that those ancestors and the tree completeness moving forward in time, descendancy research is going to be really important. So I've uploaded a tree for myself. So myself, my parents, grandparents, and so on. So when you look at my tree completeness, this looks pretty good. You know, I've got 16 of 16 second great grandparents. So also you can view that as a tree view or a fan view or a text view. So if you wanted to print it and you wanted to have it look more like a chart, you might want text view. If you look at the fan view, that's the one that I use the most for different inheritance patterns. So there's lots of different ways you can view it. You can also click on tree completeness and look at where is it that your tree is not really up to snuff yet in terms of names. Now, we all know that we're making assumptions about these names. Just because I know 35 of my seventh great grandparents doesn't mean that I really know 35 of my seventh great grandparents. It means those are the names that I've put there, and I really haven't proven them necessarily yet. But look at how my tree completeness goes down once you reach about the fourth great grandparents. I know about 3/4 of those, and then it drops off significantly. So this will give you an idea of where you need to do more work. And remember that your tree could be incorrect. We always have to have that assumption. I know people don't like that, but I say it anyway. So this is what my tree looks like with, I believe this is 8 generations. So look at all that beige all the way around the perimeter. So DNA Painter, their tree completeness tool, will show you all the places where you still have a lot of work to do. You can actually hover on, you know, each individual or click on each individual piece of that, and what'll show up there is your ancestor. So that happens to be my grandmother's mother, Ida Mae Gilbert, and it shows her birth and death and parents and all of that. So you can do lots of things on DNA Painter. This will show you that you have more work to do once you mess with that tree completeness. You can filter for xDNA inheritance pattern. You can filter for mitochondrial DNA inheritance pattern. You can filter for Y-DNA inheritance pattern. And of course, the Y-DNA inheritance isn't mine. It's my first husband's. And you can view this in the tree view also. So you can look at the X, mitochondrial, and Y contributors and the matches in tree view also. So you can see here, this is my husband's chart, and for him, the X DNA contributors are all labeled here. So that can be really helpful when you're working with trying to figure out where you might have received that X DNA. Or in the case of my cousin, Jaylyn, when I saw that we were almost a full X match, I knew that somehow she was related to my mom. So it was really, I was so relieved when I found that. You can also see the Y DNA contributors on the DNA map. You can filter for that. So along that top surname line, you can find the Y DNA contributors. Don't forget that each one of those men and their brothers and their sons and everyone moving forward also has the same Y DNA, or very, very close, maybe one mutation difference. And you can see the mitochondrial DNA contributors. So let's talk about the WATO tool, because this is something that I would consider to be a really advanced tool. WATO stands for what are the odds? And the WATO tool, the way to use this is to have a targeted person that you want to fit into a group of people you've already been working with and identified. So the WATO tool is something that you have to have a pretty good amount of a family tree built. You need to know the DNA relationships, and then you're going to try out that target person in multiple different spots. So you need a set of DNA matches who are all descended from the same ancestor or couple, and someone who's suspected to descend from that ancestor. So you have to have some pre-work done here, and there are a lot of great videos on this, but I just want to introduce you to it because it is a little bit more advanced tool. When I first learned to use WATO, I think I had a 2-hour class on it once, and I left there thinking, I don't know if I'm going to be able to learn that. I mean, it really took a lot for me to wrap my head around it because it's a lot about probabilities. And even though I write math books for a living, it was a use of it that was very different to me. So it took me a while to learn it. So don't be intimidated. You do need centimorgan information for people. So it's not good enough just to have that tree, but you do need to have some of those identified cousins. So remember when I showed you that chart in the beginning where I had identified my descendants of my mom's first and second cousins and who had tested. Also, you need a basic family tree for this group, and you need a hypothesis of where that target person might fit in, and the WATO tool will help you decide what are the odds that you're correct in your placement of that person. So there are a couple different versions of it. There's a beta one that's being tested right now, and I haven't used the beta one, so I'm not sure exactly what the differences are. I've just used the first version of the WATO tool. So once you add data, you look at the probabilities while you're testing your hypothesis. So you can see that there's a tool here. There are some DNA tests where there are different numbers of people in beige who have tested and have certain centimorgan matches. And then you move around that person, the teal, from place to place to place to see where do they best fit in and what are the odds that you're in the right place. Again, it's a pretty advanced tool. You can look at some examples at dnapainter.com. Also, Leah Larkin, who is the originator and creator of this part of the tool, the WATO tool, she recorded a video lecture at Roots Tech just a few months ago in February, I believe, and it's free on Roots Tech about what are the odds. So if you want to get a really good overview from the person who made the tool and created the tool, might be really good to try out that free video on Roots Tech. And don't forget, those Roots Tech videos are available for quite a long time, and there are hundreds of them. So go there and learn to your heart's content for free. So let's go through some demo, and we're going to look at some profiles and trees and help and tools. So I'm going to pause the recording.